In the high-stakes world of Russian power, fortunes are as volatile as the political winds that sweep through Moscow. For every billionaire who basks in the Kremlin's favor, another vanishes into exile, their immense wealth dissolving like mist. Some find their empires dismantled, their assets seized by the state or handed to more loyal players. Others face a far grimmer fate, meeting untimely ends in mysterious circumstances, from staged suicides in London mansions to sudden illnesses that defy medical explanation. The rules of this dangerous game are unwritten, but the consequences of a misstep are brutally clear. To fall from grace is not just to lose money, it is to lose everything, including one's freedom and sometimes one's life. The Western world watches this drama unfold, imposing sanctions and blacklists in an attempt to curb the Kremlin's influence. They target the super yachts, the private jets, and the sprawling European villas, believing that by freezing these trophies, they can cripple the system. Yet, this strategy often misses the mark. The oligarchs are not simply wealthy individuals, they are nodes in a complex network of global capital, deeply embedded in the world's financial architecture. Seizing a yacht is a symbolic victory, but it does little to untangle the web of power that these figures represent. For the most cunning players, these sanctions are merely a new set of rules to be navigated, another challenge in a lifelong game of survival and dominance. But amidst the public humiliation of some and the quiet disappearance of others, a different story has emerged. It is the story of an oligarch who did not just survive but thrived by becoming a ghost in the machine. The cast of characters in Russia's billionaire class is a testament to the country's turbulent transition from communism to a new kind of state-led capitalism. Take Alisher Usmanov, a metals and technology magnate whose influence once stretched from mining pits in Siberia to early investments in Facebook. His vast fortune, symbolized by the magnificent super yacht Dilbar, made him a prime target for Western sanctions. He found himself trapped, his assets frozen, his movements restricted. A powerful man suddenly confined to a gilded cage, illustrating the precariousness of wealth tied too closely to the Kremlin's orbit. Then there is Andrei Melnichenko, known for his futuristic sail-assisted Yacht A and his vast holdings in fertilizers and coal. Like Usmanov, he was swept up in the dragnet of sanctions, forced into a frantic legal battle to shield his assets and distance himself from the political decisions of Moscow. Similarly, steel baron Alexei Mordashov and banking titan Peter Avin saw their European ties severed and their fortunes shrink under the weight of international pressure. Even Roman Abramovich, once the darling of London society and owner of Chelsea Football Club, was forced into a fire sale, his carefully constructed Western persona crumbling overnight. A different breed operates closer to the core of Russian state power, their fortunes inextricably linked to the Kremlin's strategic interests. Figures like Gennady Timchenko, a co-founder of the Gunvor oil trading group, and Igor Sechin, the formidable head of state oil giant Rosneft, represent this inner circle. Their power is less about personal luxury and more about controlling the arteries of the Russian economy: oil, gas, and strategic resources. This gallery of the powerful reveals a fundamental divide. On one side are the global oligarchs who sought to integrate their wealth into the Western financial system, buying legitimacy and influence abroad. On the other are the state oligarchs whose power is derived directly from their proximity to the Kremlin. Yet, a third path existed, one that was neither fully global nor purely domestic. It was a path of strategic invisibility, mastered by a select few who understood the game on a different level. Faced with the existential threat of sanctions and political purges, Russia's oligarchs developed a sophisticated playbook for survival. The first chapter of this guide is dedicated to asset camouflage. This is not simply about moving money, it is about making ownership untraceable. They constructed labyrinthine legal structures using nested shell companies in jurisdictions from Cyprus and the British Virgin Islands to Dubai and Hong Kong. Assets were transferred into the names of trusted relatives, long-serving employees, or even complex discretionary trusts where the ultimate beneficiary is deliberately obscured. The goal was to create a fog of legal ownership so dense that investigators and regulators would be lost for years trying to penetrate it. The second critical strategy involves controlling essential industries. While luxury assets like yachts and jets are visible and easily seized, controlling a significant portion of the world's supply of potash, nickel, or grain is a different matter. These are not luxuries, they are fundamental inputs for global agriculture and industry. An oligarch who controls a critical node in the global supply chain holds immense leverage. Sanctioning such an individual or their company risks creating a boomerang effect, driving up food prices, disrupting manufacturing, and causing economic pain in the very countries imposing the sanctions. This transforms a businessman from a political target into a geopolitical problem that is too big to fail. Beyond financial and industrial strategy, physical and digital security became paramount. Many oligarchs operate with security details that rival those of minor heads of state, employing former special forces operatives to protect them and their families. Their digital lives are encased in even more formidable defenses. They hire elite cybersecurity firms to build impenetrable communication networks, sweep for bugs, and protect their data from state-sponsored hackers and corporate rivals alike. Finally, the most sophisticated players mastered the art of strategic retreat and repositioning. They understood that clinging to assets in hostile jurisdictions was a losing battle. Instead, they preemptively divested from Western markets, moving their capital and logistical hubs to more neutral or friendly territories in the Middle East and Asia. Cities like Dubai and Singapore became the new epicenters of Russian capital, offering sophisticated financial services without the political baggage of London or Zurich. In the grand theater of Russian oligarchs, Dmitry Mazepin played a role unlike any other. He was never one of the original Yeltsin-era insiders who seized state assets for pennies on the dollar, nor was he part of the St. Petersburg cohort that rose with Vladimir Putin. Mazepin was a different breed, a self-made industrialist from Minsk who built his empire methodically, piece by piece, far from the media spotlight. He did not crave the glamour of owning a sports team or the notoriety of a London mansion. His focus was singular and relentless, to dominate a less glamorous but utterly essential corner of the global economy. This quiet ambition would become his greatest strength. Mazepin's journey began in the complex world of post-Soviet chemicals and resource trading. While others were fighting for control of oil fields and aluminum smelters, he saw an opportunity in a substance the world could not live without: fertilizer. He recognized that as the global population grew, the demand for food would be non-negotiable, and therefore the demand for the nutrients that make crops grow would be perpetual. He started by consolidating disparate and often struggling chemical plants across Russia and Eastern Europe, transforming them into a cohesive and efficient production powerhouse. His company, Uralchem, became a giant, but Mazepin himself remained a relative enigma. His strategy was built on the principle of silent power. He avoided the lavish parties, the political pronouncements, and the media interviews that brought his contemporaries both fame and trouble. Instead, he focused on operations, logistics, and building a corporate structure designed for resilience. He understood that visibility was a vulnerability. While his peers were being profiled in glossy magazines, Mazepin was busy creating a corporate architecture that was deliberately opaque. He used a network of offshore holding companies and proxies not just to optimize taxes, but to build a firewall between his personal identity and the operational assets of his business, a crucial move that would later prove visionary. This deliberate cultivation of a low profile made him an outlier. In a world where wealth is often used to purchase influence and social standing, Mazepin treated his fortune as a tool for industrial consolidation and strategic independence. Dmitry Mazepin's empire was not founded on fleeting digital trends or volatile financial instruments. It was built from the ground up, literally. His company, Uralchem, and its later acquisition, Uralkali, one of the world's largest potash producers, became central pillars of the global food supply chain. Potash, along with nitrogen and phosphate, is one of the 3 critical nutrients required for modern, high-yield agriculture. Without a steady supply of these fertilizers, crop yields would plummet, threatening food security for billions of people. Mazepin placed himself at the heart of this non-negotiable global need, making his business essential not just to Russia, but to farmers in Brazil, India, China, and beyond. He did not just produce fertilizer, he mastered the logistics of its global distribution. His companies controlled a vast network of ports, railways, and shipping routes, ensuring that his products could move efficiently from the mines and factories of the Urals to the fields of the developing world. This vertical integration gave him immense control and leverage. When geopolitical tensions flared, he could redirect shipments, prioritize customers, and navigate disruptions in ways his competitors could not. He understood that controlling the supply chain was just as important as controlling the product itself. His power was not just in what he owned, but in his ability to deliver it anywhere on the planet. This central role in global agriculture gave him a unique form of leverage that other oligarchs lacked. While sanctioning an oil or gas tycoon could cause energy prices to spike, the political fallout was often manageable for Western governments. However, disrupting the fertilizer market carried a far more dangerous and unpredictable risk: global hunger. A sudden shortage of potash or ammonia could trigger a cascading crisis, leading to food riots, political instability, and humanitarian disasters in the world's most vulnerable regions. This reality placed policymakers in a difficult position. Punishing Mazepin directly could mean inadvertently punishing millions of innocent people and destabilizing entire continents. Mazepin's strategy was a masterclass in making oneself too essential to sanction. He wasn't just another billionaire, he was a linchpin of global food security. His power was rooted in the very soil that feeds humanity. As the storm clouds of sanctions gathered on the horizon in early 2022, Dmitry Mazepin executed his final and most brilliant maneuver. He did not wait for his name to appear on a Western blacklist. Instead, he acted preemptively, orchestrating a corporate vanishing act that left regulators and governments, well, completely bewildered. In a swift and decisive move, he publicly announced that he was relinquishing control of Uralchem and stepping down from his leadership roles. He sold a controlling stake in the company, ensuring that, at least on paper, he was no longer the majority owner. He effectively fired himself from the empire he had built, severing the legal ties that made him a direct target. But this was not a simple sale to a third party. It was a carefully choreographed transfer of ownership designed to obscure control. The stakes were passed to trusted, longtime associates in a complex web of holding structures. This created a legal buffer, allowing the company to argue that its primary owner was no longer a sanctioned individual. Uralchem could continue to operate, ship its products, and engage with international markets, claiming it was now independent of the man who had built it. Mazepin had transformed himself from a tangible owner into a ghost, his influence still present but his legal accountability erased. He had become untraceable on the official documents that sanctions regimes rely upon. The brilliance of this move was in its timing and its understanding of how sanctions work. Sanctions are legal instruments that target specific individuals and the entities they own or control. By formally divesting before the sanctions hammer fell, Mazepin created a legal gray area. Was he still in de facto control? Almost certainly. Could Western governments prove it in a court of law? Especially when ownership was now hidden behind layers of proxies and offshore entities in jurisdictions that do not cooperate with Western investigators? It was a near impossible task. He had exploited the system's reliance on legal definitions of ownership, making himself a phantom on the balance sheet. This preemptive divestment was the culmination of years of strategic planning. The immediate aftermath of Mazepin's disappearing act revealed the true power of his strategy. While the European Union and other Western nations did place him on their sanctions lists as an individual, the impact was blunted. He had already taken the critical step of separating himself, at least on paper, from his corporate empire. The key question was no longer about freezing his personal assets but whether to sanction Uralchem itself. And here, the world blinked. The United States, in a clear signal of its priorities, issued guidance specifically clarifying that transactions related to Russian food and fertilizer were not prohibited, fearing the impact on global food prices. This hesitation created a crucial loophole. Even as Mazepin himself was officially blacklisted, the products of his former empire were given a green light to flow into world markets. Shipping companies, insurers, and banks, reassured by the official guidance, could continue to facilitate the trade of Russian fertilizer without fear of secondary sanctions. The world's need for food trumped its desire to punish a Kremlin-linked oligarch. Mazepin had successfully weaponized the world's dependency on his products, creating a shield that protected his business operations even as he personally came under fire. He had made his empire too big to fail and too important to isolate. The strategy went beyond simply avoiding sanctions. It involved actively repositioning his logistical chains. As European ports became more complicated to navigate, Mazepin's network seamlessly pivoted towards Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. New hubs were established, and trade routes were redrawn to bypass hostile territories. His companies even engaged in humanitarian gestures, donating shipments of fertilizer to African nations, a move that generated immense goodwill and further complicated the narrative for Western policymakers. How could they justify blocking a company that was, in effect, helping to avert famine in the developing world. It was a masterful stroke of public relations and geopolitical maneuvering. Ultimately, Dmitry Mazepin became untouchable because he had made himself both invisible and essential. He was invisible on paper, a ghost in the corporate machine, making it legally difficult to target his business. And his business was essential to the world, making it politically and economically catastrophic to do so. He had transcended the simple binary of being pro-West or pro-Kremlin. He demonstrated that in the new global order, true power lies not in armies or ideologies but in the quiet control of indispensable resources. Dmitry Mazepin's story is more than just the tale of one clever oligarch. It represents a fundamental shift in the nature of global power. For centuries, power was defined by nation-states, armies, and political alliances. Wealthy individuals, no matter how rich, were ultimately subject to the authority of the governments under which they operated. Mazepin, however, has pioneered a new model, a form of transnational power that exists above and beyond the reach of any single government, including his own in Russia and those of his adversaries in the West. He operates in the seams of the global system, exploiting its dependencies and contradictions. This new paradigm is not based on loyalty to a flag, but on the control of essential, non-negotiable global flows. Whether it's food, energy, or critical data, the individuals and corporations that control these arteries hold a form of sovereignty that rivals that of traditional states. They can influence global prices, reroute supply chains, and impact the lives of billions, all while remaining legally insulated within a web of offshore entities and complex ownership structures. They are not beholden to voters or public opinion, only to the logic of the market and their own strategic imperatives. This makes them incredibly powerful and profoundly unaccountable. Mazepin's genius was to recognize this shift before others. He understood that both the Kremlin and the West were bound by their own sets of rules and limitations. The Kremlin, for all its authority within Russia, needs figures like him to generate foreign currency and project influence through critical industries. The West, for all its economic might, is constrained by its own legal processes and its fear of self-inflicted economic harm, such as triggering a global food crisis. Mazepin built his empire in the space between these constraints, playing both sides against the middle. He made himself useful to the Kremlin but not entirely dependent on it, and too risky for the West to fully attack. This redefines what it means to be an oligarch or a magnate in the 21st century. The goal is no longer to simply accumulate wealth, but to achieve a state of strategic independence. It is about becoming a system-critical actor, a node in the network so vital that removing it would cause the entire structure to flicker. This is a form of power that is subtle, patient, and built on a deep understanding of global logistics and legal architecture. It is less about the bombastic displays of wealth that characterized the first generation of oligarchs, and more about the quiet, invisible control that defines the new elite. Mazepin did not just survive, he wrote the rulebook for this new era. In the end, the story of Dmitry Mazepin is an enigma that leaves us with unsettling questions about the future of power and influence. While many of his peers saw their fortunes frozen and their influence collapse, he engineered an escape that was as brilliant as it was audacious. He stands as perhaps the only Russian billionaire to have truly slipped the grasp of both Vladimir Putin's increasingly demanding regime and the full force of Western sanctions. He is not an exile, publicly decrying the Kremlin, nor is he a humiliated vassal, his assets at the mercy of the state. He exists in a third space, a gray zone of his own creation, where he remains powerful, wealthy, and most importantly, free. His success provides a stark lesson for governments around the world. It shows that traditional tools of economic statecraft, like sanctions, have their limits when confronted by a truly sophisticated and forward-thinking adversary. These tools were designed for a world of clear ownership and national jurisdictions, but they are less effective in an era of opaque trusts, proxy ownership, and globalized essential industries. Mazepin did not break the rules, he simply understood them better than those who wrote them, and designed a system that was immune to them. He demonstrated that the global financial and legal system, in all its complexity, can be turned into a shield for those who know how to exploit its architecture. He redefined power by making it invisible. While the world was focused on the super yachts in Monaco and the penthouses in New York, he was quietly consolidating his control over the world's fertilizer supply. He understood that true leverage comes not from what you can show, but from what the world cannot live without. His story forces us to look beyond the headlines and consider the hidden infrastructure that underpins our modern lives. The real power brokers of the 21st century may not be the ones we see on television or read about in the news, but the silent figures who control the flow of resources upon which we all depend. The Mazepin enigma is therefore a blueprint for a new type of power player on the world stage, one who is transnational, legally elusive, and strategically indispensable. He outmaneuvered the Kremlin by making himself too valuable to crush, and outsmarted the West by making himself too dangerous to sanction. His quiet victory marks a new chapter in the ongoing struggle between state power and private capital. It is a suspenseful and ongoing story, and its implications are only just beginning to be understood. If you found this exploration of power and survival compelling, please like this video, share it with others who are interested in the hidden dynamics of the global economy, and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that shape our world.